Okay, it is 6:02. That's called the March Alameda County Water District Board meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Directors Akbari,
Here.
Gunther,
Here.
Sethy,
Here.
Weed,
Here.
and Huang.
Here. Let's do the salute to the flag and then we'll do housekeeping. And Director Sethy, would you do the honor, please?
Yes. On my word. Pledge allegiance to the flag. of the United States of America. To the republic which stands. One nation under God. Indivisible. With liberty and justice for all.
All right, before we move on to public comments, I believe General Manager Stevenson has some housekeeping remarks.
You bet I do. My name is Ed Stevenson, and I serve as the district's general manager. I would like to welcome everybody in your attendance at this evening's regular board meeting. Members of the public may participate in this board meeting in person or remotely by either using the Zoom application or by telephone. Any member of the public present in person who wishes to make comments may approach the speaker's podium at the appropriate time. For those participating remotely, note that the meeting agenda, staff reports, and presentation materials for this meeting are all available on the district's website at acwd.org. You may reference the instructions at the top of the agenda for how to participate using the controls in the Zoom app or your dial pad if participating by telephone audio. This board meeting is being recorded and will be made available to the public for future viewing. Again, thank you all for attending. And President Huang, that completes my housekeeping remarks.
Thank you very much. Next item is public comment. I do not see anyone online. I do notice there's one member of the public in attendance.
Just in time.
Would you like to address the board, Mr. Brewer?
Yes, thank you. Lake Elizabeth, built in 1968, an artificial lake, 6 feet deep, redredged in 2001 or so. And now the last year the fish died. 1,000 fish died. There's several newspaper stories about that. Owned by the Alameda County Flood Control District, not the water district. And they, so now they say that they're just, that lake is a flood control facility, and as long as they deem it in their judgment to be fulfilling its function as flood control, unimpaired flood control, whatever that means, then they don't have to do anything. Some people believe in that who are like the environmental people. They're saying that the lake is too shallow, and other people say that if the lake gets it's 2 feet deep now, 3 feet deep now, which is half depth, and shrinking, because that's what happens with lakes. You have to, if you want a lake, you have to constantly remove silt and sediment, always. For every lake in the world, this is true. So lakes have a natural life cycle, and they tend to die. But if Fremont has chosen, wants to have a lake, somebody's going to have to take, put in the maintenance work to, it's an artificial lake, so they're going to have to artificially maintain it, as was done historically. But every generation has their own task, right? 25 years ago, they took on the task of dredging the lake, and 50 years ago, they took on the task of building the lake, and now we have our task, and the flood control district, and the city's response to this. Oh, the flood control district, that's what they said. They're very acquiescent, very subservient. That's what they said. So all they can do is, put in little fountains or aerations or whatever. It's very, very subservient, very acquiescent. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brewer.
President Huang, may I be able to make a comment to append? It's in concurrence with the speaker.
I'm going to ask council for clarification.
Yeah, a quick comment. Usually you don't comment, and maybe you just made that comment by asking to make that comment. But I make it very quick.
I just want it publicly known. It's our former director Lampert, Art Lampert, who was longtime city council member here, when he was on the Parks and Recreation Commission and Planning Commission for the city of Fremont. He and Morris Simon, the founder of Fremont Bank, were the two architects that came up with the plans for Lake Elizabeth and were able to draw federal funding from the Nixon administration in order to build, provide for that lake. I personally have suggested to the mayor and council that they should be using money from the clean water fee that is on our property tax bill. We have fees that are charged by the water district on the property tax bill, and then there's a clean water fee, and it doesn't identify who is the recipient of those monies. It is the city of Fremont every year. And so I have strongly suggested that those funds need to be used up for the mitigation efforts on the lake and not to draw upon the park and recreation funds as they're currently doing. So I'm in agreement with the speaker. I'm
Thank
making
you,
my own
Director
public statement.
Sethy.
Thank you.
All right.
May I also, because
no,
Maybe
no,
we
no.
should move on to either rearrange the agenda and start talking about
under
director's
items for the board,
comments, but I don't
I'll
think
make
we
some
should be
comments
having
about
a dialogue under.
So
public
I am going
comments.
to say that let's focus on items that's related to ACWD and move on to the next item. I did notice that we have one new members of the public. Would you wish to address the board on any item that's not on the agenda?
President Wong, the reason I made my statement is that there are a lot of people in the community that think the clean water fee is a fee that the Alameda County Water District is charging.
I-
It is not. It's the city of Fremont that's the recipient.
I totally
it's
understand
not
that,
spent on
and
water.
if we are going to have this discussion, we should agendize it. So cutting you off is not because I don't agree with the comment. Cutting you off is because it's part of public comment and we have rules and requirements that kind of limit our ability to have this discussion. So if there's a request and there's a nexus to discuss this item further, we could agendize it. And we could have that discussion during director's comments and agenda requests, please. All right, with that, would you wish to address the board, sir? All right. Then with that, let's move on to I will close the public comment. I still do not see anybody online. Is that correct, Mr. Salinas? Okay. Then with that, let's move on to the consent calendar, please. Do I have any motion to add items to the consent calendar?
I'll make the motion to add items 5.1, 5.2, and 5.3 to the consent calendar.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
May I
Of course.
make a comment on one consent item?
Then so consultant, if there's a comment on an item, should I take it off the consent?
If it's going to be a quick comment, he could make it now, but if it's
Okay.
going to be a longer comment, you should
Very
remove the
quick.
consent.
All right.
Item
Go for it.
4.5. I'm the director that requested attendance at the Institute for Local Government webinar, which is not normally granted for compensation for the board members, but I would just like to make my other colleagues aware of the fact that this is a very important issue that's come up where we got rid of redevelopment agencies under Governor Brown early in his term, a dozen years ago. And now, under Prop 4, they're trying to recreate climate resilience districts, which are kind of like the old redevelopment districts with tax increment financing. I'm very concerned about this because if the cities in our local area set up their own resilience districts, we may be subject to that tax increment financing. So I'm going to learn at this webinar, and I'll bring back information to the community and the board. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I think we have a motion and a second to add 3 items to a consent calendar. Roll call, please.
Directors Akbari,
Aye.
Gunther,
Aye.
Sethy,
Aye.
Weed,
Aye.
and Huang.
Aye. Do I have a motion to adopt the consent calendar as amended?
I'll move.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Directors Akbari,
Aye.
Gunther,
Aye.
Sethy,
Aye.
Weed,
Aye.
and Huang.
Aye. Moving on to item 5.4.
Thank you, President Wong. Item 5.4 is appointment to the boards of the Bay Area Water Supply and Conservation Agency and the Bay Area Regional Water System Financing Authority. And as the board knows, we are one of 26 member agencies of the Bay Area Water Supply and Conservation Agency, which is a an agency that's governed by a 26-member board of directors, and Director Weed is the district's representative on that board, as well as the Associated Regional Finance Authority Board. Director Weed's term ends on June 30, 2025. And so now is the time for this board to appoint who it would like to represent ACWD on the BOSCA board. Director Weed has indicated that he's very willing to continue to serve as a member of that board on behalf of the district, a member of both boards on behalf of the district. Also, though, indicated that if there's interest by other directors, feel free to chime in. So staff's recommendation is by motion, take action to appoint to a 4-year term on the Bay Area Water Supply and Conservation Agency and the Bay Area Regional Water System Financing Authority boards through June 30, 2029.
Do we have to name the appointment or recommendation?
Yes.
Okay, I recommend that we add Director Weed's name to that recommendation.
And I will support that. I will also point out that being appointed to the board does not limit any board member from attending the board meetings or from the board policy meetings. And I make an attempt to join in on the board policy committee meetings, which are more in depth before the board meeting, which is, the full group of participants. I find the policy group to be very informative. And so I just encourage folks, even though Director Weed is our vote and representative currently, hopefully prospectively, others are welcome to join too.
Thank you, Director Sethy. Any other questions or comments from the board?
I'll
If,
just add in that I'm also very supportive of Director Weed continuing his service.
same here, really appreciate your service. But before we move on, do I have any questions or comments from our members of the public that's in attendance? Seeing none, and I think our one member of the public online disappeared, right?
Not there.
All right. Do I have so we have a motion, right?
Correct.
And a second?
Correct.
Okay,
Director Weed.
roll call.
Directors Akbari,
Aye.
Gunther,
Aye.
Sethy,
Aye.
Weed,
Aye.
and Huang.
Aye.
I want to thank the board members. Let me encourage board members, though, if there's an interest, they have tours of the Achechi system. And I've deferred in the past to some of our staff. I'd encourage other board members, if you want to take an overnight trip up to O'Shaughnessy. It is informative, and it's where we spend 20% of our water supply money. Plus, because 20% of our water supply, but a premium on the water. And so as those become available, please.
I have done that tour and the overnight stay, and it is absolutely fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you, Director
There's
Witt.
one coming up in June, and
I stayed in the same room as Bill and Hillary Clinton.
All right, with that,
Not
on
at
that
the same
happy note, no, we're not going there. Moving on to item 5.5, please.
Okay, item 5.5 is resolution authorizing the execution and delivery of an installment purchase contract, a continuing disclosure certificate, an escrow agreement, and the distribution of a preliminary official statement in connection with water system revenue bonds, and approving and directing the sale and approving the publication of notice of intention to sell relating to the water system revenue bonds, and authorizing the distribution of an official notice of sale for the purchase of such bonds and related actions. And now I know how Mr. Wunderlich felt reading a very, very similar agenda item title moments ago. So Director, Mr. Wunderlich, would you please get us started on this item?
You don't want to get the full experience and read it again in the
No, you're good.
recommendation? So the district and Union Sanitary District entered into a joint exercise of powers agreement, most recently amended as of February 24, 2025. And this agreement created the Alameda County Water District Financing Authority as a mechanism for the district to issue bonds to finance critical capital improvements. The district is planning to issue up to $35 million in new water revenue bonds, plus issuance costs later this month. Also, we're planning to refinance approximately 23 million of our outstanding 2015 bonds if market conditions will provide for savings. Total authority requested at the meeting of the Financing Authority, which was held immediately preceding this meeting, exceeded these combined amounts of 58 million to one, allow for issuance expenses, and two, to provide flexibility in the final financing structure. So while we don't expect this to be the case with this particular bond issuance, on occasion, it is determined to be advantageous to pay more initially in exchange for a lower interest rate. During the recently concluded rate-setting process, the district made the decision to proceed with an issuance of 35 million in new revenue bonds this fiscal year to help fund the capital program. And so we're recommending that now the ACWD board approve the necessary legal documents to implement the bond sale. And of course, the actions as necessary for the Financing Authority were concluded earlier this evening. Board approval of this item will help achieve District Strategic Plan Goal 3, improve the district's financial stability and transparency. So the recommendation is by motion, adopt a resolution authorizing the execution and delivery of an installment purchase contract, a continuing disclosure certificate, an escrow agreement, and the distribution of a preliminary official statement and official statement in connection with water system revenue bonds, and approving and directing the sale and approving the publication of a notice of intention to sell relating to the water system revenue bonds, and authorizing the distribution of an official notice of sale for the purchase of such bonds and related actions. With that overview, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Questions or comments from the board? No? Okay. Questions or comments from our members of the public that's in attendance? Seeing none, do I have a motion from the board?
John?
Motion,
Move the
staff recommendation?
approval of the staff recommendation.
Do I have a second?
Second from the other member of the Finance Committee.
Roll call, please.
Directors Akbari,
Aye.
Gunther,
Aye.
Sethy,
Aye.
Weed,
Aye.
and Huang.
Aye. Item 5.6, please.
Item 5.6 is authorization for the general manager to enter into a memorandum of understanding with Kern County Water Agency and other state water project contractors to explore water management collaboration concepts and opportunities. And I'll turn this one over to our Director of Water Resources, Ms. Heides.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. The district has a long-term water supply contract with the State of California Department of Water Resources, or DWR, for the delivery of state water project water, along with 28 other local water agencies throughout the state. As the board's aware, the state water project provides about 40% of the district's annual supply, making it an important part of our portfolio, along with groundwater banking, which allows us to use state project supplies flexibly and in times of drought. Kern County Water Agency has recently approached the district and other state project contractors to work together to explore new water management collaboration concepts and opportunities over the next 18 months through a non-binding Memorandum of Understanding, or MOU. The MOU would not require a financial contribution or budget allocation, but would include staff participation in discussions to identify and evaluate concepts that could help to optimize the allocation of costs and benefits for state project supplies. Staff sees this as a good opportunity to explore ways to optimize our use of state supplies through the potential partnerships among the contractors, learn more about water management and groundwater banking efforts in the Central Valley, and consider new ideas for managing our state supplies that might come to light through this collaborative discussion. The item was reviewed with the Water Resources and Conservation Committee on February 26, 2025, and board approval of this action will help meet the district's strategic plan goal 2.3, evaluate new and innovative water management concepts. So tonight's recommendation is by motion, authorize the general manager to enter into a memorandum of understanding among the Alameda County Water District, Kern County Water Agency, and other state water project contractors to explore water management collaboration concepts and opportunities. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions or comments from the board?
No, fully in agreement.
Director Wee?
I support the recommendation. There are some other issues being raised, as I understand, being raised by DWR that was in a reference in a letter that was, Laura Heides was a signature to, along with the Met, Zone 7, and some other water districts. about discussions at DWR to change the definition of what is allowable water in a water bank and what is not, whether it be native water versus imported water. We foresee this group as developing a response to those proposed changes or suggested changes by the staff at DWR.
So I think what you're referring to is a letter that we sent related to the Delta Advanced Project Water, or I'm sorry, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, Sigma Kern County Subbasin proceedings related to groundwater banking. And so this group isn't specifically going to be dealing with the groundwater banking issues and the Kern Basin Sigma issues. This group is really more to discuss how can we optimize our use of state project water? Does that involve, banking discussions or new ways of doing transfers and exchanges or things like that, where we might be able to come up with some new ideas to optimize and enhance our collective use of state project water that could be a benefit to us. So it's a little bit of a different set of discussions, but we do continue collaborating separately with the various parties that are involved in groundwater banking on the current Sigma process.
If it's within the purview of the group, I would encourage you to also look at the investor-owned water supplies that are the water merchants that are acquiring and in the market for purchase and resale of water supplies. Silvertip, John Vidovich, and others are also operating that district with their acquiring and selling water. So hopefully that is in the scope of your review.
Okay, well, thank you. I will ask, and I'm sure we're going to have a lot of interesting discussions about new things that we'll learn.
I had even received a call from a director in Southern California suggesting that we maybe, because of the position of DWR on whether to pull the rug out from underneath this on semi-tropic and some others, if the interpretation of some of their staff comes into play, it's really not water that we can bank and count on. And maybe we should sell the asset to a third party and let them carry the risk.
Oh.
That's a totally different issue.
Yeah, that's a different discussion. All right, any other?
May I just
Director,
add
go
one
ahead.
short comment, because I know Ms. Heides is aware of this, but I just read through the NASDAQ Velez water market report for this month, and talking about the north of Delta and the south of Delta water transfers. And I hope that your group will pay attention to this opportunity to price water at the market. We've been talking about market transfers for quite some time, and now we have a pretty reliable, although it's not used as much as I thought it would be, but it is in place. It is a NASDAQ index for the pricing of water. And I find the fluctuations in the water prices to be very interesting from one quarter to the other. If you look back on period of years, right now I think we're around $450 an acre foot for south of Delta water transfers. So it's something I would ask to have in your discussions. How can we leverage these kind of tools in the future?
Great, thank you.
Let me add on to that. Not only is the volatility in the water pricing, is an extraordinary range of water pricing. Amador Valley's, Amador sold water to Jackson Valley Water District at $18 an acre foot. We're talking 100 times that. That gives you some idea of the extraordinary change. Or when PG&E was selling water at a couple of dollars an acre foot because it was a waste product through their power generation, the dam in Placerville. Incredible variables here, and not an established market that we have not found our ways into those type of deals. I would hope we can get more involved in water marketing. I can see it as a business center for this district.
Thank you, Director Wee. Any other directors' questions or comments? Seeing none, do we have any questions or comments from our members of the public? Mr. Abreu?
Just want to quickly run down three of the most obvious things with this state water project. One is the allocation the allocation of water supplies, or, they say they're going to be delivering 50-something% of table A allocations, long-term average. In the last 2 years, which have been very average water years, this year and last year, it's like 35% this year and 40-something% last year. So, and over 10-year average, it's all something similar to that. So they're not delivering what they said they were going to deliver. Second, the state water project, it's like communism. They give out allocations at zero price, at no cost. It's everybody gets an allocation. It comes from, decreed by the Pope or something, and at no cost. You just pay the transportation cost or whatever. So some years you get 100%, some years you get 10%. It's amazing. So one concept there would be a price mechanism. Am I talking like a capitalist, like a libertarian? A price mechanism for water? That he mentioned that. That would be a great thing, I think. Speaking as a radical right-wing free market person. And second, and lastly, the Kern County, the most obvious thing there is the depletion of the water tables, which you can detect on satellites by watching the ground levels subside, and also by watching the variations in gravity levels from satellites, and which vary with the amount of water that's in the depleting aquifer. So whatever they do down there, if they don't get that fixed sooner or later, something is going to break, and the aquifer won't really be usable as a water bank.
Thank you, Mr. Abreu. So with that, I think it's staff online.
Yes.
Okay. Then with that, do I have a motion?
I'll move.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Directors Akbari,
Aye.
Gunther,
Aye.
Sethy,
Aye.
Weed,
All right.
and Huang.
Aye. With that, let's move on to item 6.1, board committee reports. Any questions or comments on any of the board committee reports from the board? I am seeing and hearing none. Any questions or comments from our members of the public on any of the board committee reports? I'm not seeing any. Then let's move on to item 6.2, operational reports. I know there's going to be a comment from the board.
I have one.
All right, Director Sethy.
I was in a meeting with our general manager, Ms. Heides, and Mr. Thomas Nizer on Monday. And I asked for an explanation about why the hardness numbers for the northern part of Fremont and Union City were so high. And so maybe staff can explain. I think they explained it to me very well.
Mr. Stevenson.
Sure. At the risk of saying something Mr. Wickham wouldn't say, I'll let him correct me. But basically, I think the board notices and our public notices when the hardness levels increase, especially when they increase significantly. Right now, they're significantly higher than they typically are. And that's due to our source waters. So at this point, currently, the Hetch Hetchy system is running, the San Francisco Regional Water System is running on local water from the Alameda Creek watershed and the Sonoma Valley Water Treatment Plant. And so that local water is significantly harder than the very soft water that we'll normally get out of Hetch Hetchy Reservoir in the Sierras. And so water from Hetch Hetchy has been stopped. Currently, there's maintenance work going on. It generally happens about this time every year. Some outages last longer than others. This year's a little bit of an extended outage. But all that to say is that it's a temporary thing. we will be going back to sort of normal San Francisco regional water system operations shortly.
Great. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Director Gunther?
Well, I might as well, considering I think I got the highest number. It's okay. It's been higher. You know, I remember it being over 200. So, you know, do our best.
Yep.
But it's been higher.
You still had to take your hammer out?
The hammer's a little smaller now, but, and Director Fernandez, I believe, lives down the street from me practically a little bit. So he's probably enjoying some of the same quality water that I'm getting. But the hard water is good. It's still there. It's still fine. It is much better than where we were. So we can't really lose sight of that. So, all right.
Director Akbari?
I am curious if we've heard from any customers about hardness of the water, because I know generally when we see spikes, we do hear some customer complaints, but just wanted to know what that looks like.
Usually I hear from the board mostly. Understandably, you are all paying very, very close attention to this. I'll turn to Mr. Wickham and ask whether there's been much in the way of customer input.
None that really stood out this last month. I can double check on that, but no reports of hardness as far as being extraordinary.
I think there's still a public perception that the hardness over there is through the roof. And it's not. But, you know, public perception is what it is. You don't really watch the meeting, get involved in it.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments from the board? Director Weed?
Let me note that our water use is below projections in February. The wet March may well be again. So be alerted to revenue challenges if this continues.
Thank you.
I'd like to make one comment on the rainfall report.
Yes, Director Sethy?
If there's any update as to where we are, I know we're right around average right now, but is there an update?
I'd be willing to
So-
bet Ms. Heidiss is ready for that question.
Yeah, and we're getting pretty close to average, but I believe Mr. Ash will be covering that in his update this afternoon, so I don't want to steal his
Oh,
thunder.
okay.
Alright.
All right. So one thing I've noticed when I've been going, because I've been looking at trying to refresh our website for ideas. It's been a while since we formalized the current setup of our website. And when I'm looking at other water districts around the state of California, I see that they have the rainfall totals and reservoir totals for their areas. And I'm wondering if we could add that feature to our website so that people know exactly where our rainfall is year to date. You know, it should be easily visible. And on a lot of websites, it's right on the home page. Is that something we could take a look at?
Let me take that back and talk with our folks who update the website and stuff. We have our sort of process for updating our graphics and getting our daily rainfall data. And I'm not sure how that will integrate with our website, but we'll take a look.
Doesn't seem like it'd be very hard to do.
Yeah, there may
And
be
for
some
most, it's just a
widgets.
little barometer or a scale,
Right.
you know, in the corner of the page.
Yeah, we've got some pretty crafty people here. You know, I've seen that too. What I've seen is mostly on agency websites that depend more broadly on local precipitation. It'll be something that's more prevalent for them, more,
Yeah, that's
you
what
know,
I'm
relevant.
looking for. You
Yeah.
know, what, exactly what you're showing here, you know, what's the highest rainfall year, the lowest, the median,
Mhm.
where we are to date.
Yeah,
Doesn't seem like it'd be very hard to put that on the website.
we can look at that.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? If not, do you have any questions or comments from our members of the public on our operational reports? I'm not seeing any, so then let's move on to staff presentations. Item 6.3.1, Niles Cone groundwater conditions and survey report review.
Okay, well, we know that this is really the reason why you all came here this evening.
It's
And-
my favorite report of the year,
best.
Mike.
Right.
I love it.
No offense taken, but yes, we're also, we always look forward to this every year. And Ms. Heides, did you have anything you would like to say to kick things off?
Yes, I would love to kick this one off. So the Replenishment Assessment Act of Alameda County Water District requires the board to order an engineering survey and report on groundwater conditions, which was ordered by the board on November 14th, 2024, and is the first step in the process to establish a replenishment assessment for the next fiscal year. While the district monitors groundwater levels and water quality through a number of programs and regulatory requirements, the survey report on groundwater conditions and the groundwater monitoring report are prepared specifically to comply with the reporting requirements outlined in Section 7 of the Act itself. Recommendations in the survey report on groundwater conditions are based on projected activities needed to sustain the groundwater basin in fiscal year 2025-26, with consideration of groundwater levels and quality documented in the 2024 groundwater monitoring report. Tonight, Mike Hallowell, senior engineer, is presenting information on the Niles Cone groundwater conditions and survey report to assist the board in its review of the two reports received by the board on February 13th, 2025. Eileen Chen, hydrogeologist and author of the groundwater monitoring report, is also here tonight. This is Mike's 34th year authoring the survey report and Eileen's 21st year authoring the groundwater monitoring report. I'd like to thank them both for their dedication to these important efforts. I'd also like to acknowledge Michelle Walden, Groundwater Resources Manager, who is here in support of tonight's item as well. And before we begin, I'd like to note that tonight's presentation happens to coincide quite appropriately with National Groundwater Awareness Week, which is March 9th through 15th this year, which is an annual observance established to highlight the responsible development, management, and use of groundwater, to bring awareness through education and public outreach, and to encourage yearly water well testing and well maintenance. This year, the California Legislature is taking steps through House Resolution number 22 to commemorate the importance of groundwater as a vital natural resource essential to California residents and recognize Groundwater Awareness Week. Locally, we'll be celebrating this event with groundwater awareness outreach materials posted by Public Affairs, as well as presentations by Groundwater Resources staff to students at American High School. And now I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Hallowell to begin his presentation.
So, Mr. Hallowell, before you start, just for time management, I'd like to let you know that we will have a time certain break at 7:15 for 15 minutes.
Okay.
So now you know how much time you have to do your
I'll
presentation.
make it quick. Okay. Good evening, members of the board, staff, and public. With Ms. Chen and Ms. Walden, and yours truly, we appreciate this opportunity to present slides and answer questions in follow-up to last month's submittal of our two annual reports on the groundwater basin, the monitor report and the survey report. Our aim is to assist your preparation for the public hearing on replenishment assessment. To that end, we'll touch on the latest groundwater basin conditions, outlook for replenishment water next fiscal year, and then the state of finances of district infrastructure operations and programs devoted to promoting the supply and quality of groundwater for the benefit of its users commonly. Then we'll conclude with an explanation of staff's recommendation on the rate of replenishment assessment for next fiscal year. And of course, that's the per acre foot charge for groundwater pumping. That recommendation, along with supporting rationale, will be the subject of the public hearing coming up next month on April 8th. If the hearing can be completed that evening, then the board could, as early as that same evening, then adopt the resolutions that make the formal findings, including the replenishment assessment rate effective July 1. However, should the board find itself needing more time to consider public comment, the Replenishment Assessment Act would allow the board up to the first Tuesday in May to complete the hearing, and the second Tuesday in May to make the findings through resolution. So in support of those findings, the Replenishment Assessment Act drives the content in the survey report and by extension, the monitoring report. That includes an update on the status of remaining seawater intrusion. So let's begin with a map view of the Niles Cone Basin. The Hayward Fault impedes lateral flow of groundwater, subdividing our basin into the above Hayward Fault and below Hayward Fault subbasins. Taking a cutaway view looking north, we can see the system of principal aquifers. The Hayward Fault is now depicted as a vertical line, the red vertical line. To the right or east, the above Hayward Fault subbasin contains the above Hayward Fault aquifer. And on the opposite side, the below Hayward Fault subbasin features a stack of 4 principal aquifers. By order of depth, they are the Newark, the Seneval, the Fremont, and the Deep. The Seneval and Fremont are often referred to as a combined unit called the Seneval-Fremont. The Newark aquifer is interconnected with San Francisco Bay, shown to the upper left. Between 1920 and 1970, salt water did enter our basin and migrated inland via the Newark aquifer. Once inland, it made its way downward to impact the Seneval, Fremont, and Deep aquifer, traveling through natural weaknesses in the aquitards and abandoned wells. Substantial salt water got into the basin because overpumping caused Newark aquifer groundwater levels to drop below sea level for an extended period of time. By 1962, the level in the 4-bay indicator well located here was 60 feet below sea level, and the brackish water with a chloride concentration greater than 250 milligrams per liter had migrated all the way to the, made it all the way to the Hayward Fault. But just about this time, in response to this, decades before the statewide Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, ACWD got its Replenishment Assessment Act, enabling implementation of critical sustainability actions in the 1960s and ensuing decades. One of those outcomes was consequently well levels in the Newark aquifer rebounding, climbing above sea level by 1972, and reestablishing the natural flow direction in the Newark aquifer back to San Francisco Bay. So progress has since been made in repelling brackish water back toward the bay. So we've gone from this in 1962 to this as of the last fall of 2024, with about 47% of the 1962 brackish area inland of the salt ponds now restored. A recent improvement in the water quality can be verified by charting the last 10 years of chloride concentrations in individual Newark aquifer wells that are in our monitoring well network, and then calculating trend as a percent per year type of value. A negative value means decreasing salt content, which is good. So negative values are good. Mapping the values to the locations of their respective wells gives a sense of how brackish water is behaving throughout the geographic area. And with a median value of negative 2.4% per year, we'd say the aquifer is doing a nice job improving. Unlike the Newark, the Seneval Fremont aquifer does not have an outlet to the bay, so it's not possible to just simply push the brackish water out. Instead, the Seneval Fremont is rendered less salty over time as aquifer reclamation program wells pumping water for the desalination facility remove that brackish water, and then good quality water from the restored part of the Newark from above seeps down in. An update of mass by the contour interval method suggests that the Seneval Fremont could be 49% of the way to a 250 milligram per liter cleanup goal, starting from our 1974 starting point. And the set of monthly negative 10-year trend percentage values do provide hard evidence of recent and ongoing restoration of the Seneval Fremont, including locations where the first detection of brackish water occurred after 1962. Although we don't have ARP wells pumping from the deep aquifer, trend percentages for that aquifer as well convey a pattern of stability to slight improvement over time. So overall, a very good news story for the basin. We do seem to see a gradual recovery over time continuing. A critical prerequisite to such a success is healthy groundwater levels in the Newark aquifer. Over most of the last 53 years, levels in the freshwater part of the Newark aquifer have been comfortably above sea level by a margin that overcomes the density of seawater to enable brackish water in the Newark to continue to be pushed back to the bay. The red line at the bottom is denotes mean sea level. Sea level rise is shown more dramatically in this particular figure. It's now at about 0.64, 0.65 above the 1929 datum. Low groundwater episodes can't always be avoided. Droughts will happen. But such ebbs can be rendered less severe by continuing our practice of boosting levels in normal to wet years when we have the local water to do that, reducing the amount of imported water that we might otherwise need in dry years. Using our groundwater model, we've projected groundwater levels through next fiscal year, staying in the middle to upper part of the operating range for both the below Hayward Fault subbasin and the above Hayward Fault. Provided, of course, we realize, about average rainfall, through this winter and next, yielding about 20,000 acre feet of local runoff that we can put into our recharge ponds in fiscal year 25-26. Of course, supplemental water could still be taken if actual conditions are drier than our chosen scenario. But with the delivery of supplemental water not projected at this time, imported water costs would be limited to fixed charges per our water banking agreement with Semi-Tropic and our state water project contract, represented by the dark blue sliver at the top and the lighter blue pie slice to the right. The rest of the slices are recharge operations at the Quarry Lakes, watershed and basin management, monitoring and protection programs, administration in general, and capital improvements. We show only 8 categories here, but the work that goes into this particular slide here entails examination of the district's budget with a great deal of granularity and discernment so that we count only those items that benefit the groundwater basin for the benefit of all its users commonly. So nothing from the distribution system. To fund the projected 25.8 million total cost for the basin, we start at the top of this particular chart here with replenishment assessment revenue. At the very top there, as we know, the rate for agricultural and city park pumping is fixed at $8 per acre foot per the Replenishment Assessment Act, but the rest of the private pumping is subject to the variable rate, now at $557 an acre foot. We have identical columns in this table because staff is not proposing a change in the replenishment assessment rate for next fiscal year. On to the next row. ACWD by far uses the most groundwater in the basin, so we evaluate the 17,900 acre feet using the $557 an acre foot rate there. And in so doing, and that 17,900 acre feet, of course, is slated for our distribution system next fiscal year. So in so doing, applying the 557, we ensure fairness to the private pumpers also paying at that rate. Then we have tax revenue and a grant for one of the groundwater capital projects, totaling up our revenue to 28.5 million, which is about 2.6 million over cost. Putting this on our multi-year cash flow, we can see we had positive balances the last couple of fiscal years and expect to complete the current year with one also. So we're generating savings that should help us get through another ramp up in the groundwater capital improvement program starting in 2028 with the Valicitos pipeline project. Based on the data we have today, we appear to be on course to get through this future hump here with the past Valicitos without the need for a rate increase this year, next fiscal year. Beyond that, though, tough to say. We'll have a fresh outlook when we come back and see you next year with the 2026 survey report. By then, the district will have finalized a new budget and a 25-year capital improvement program. If the rate were to stay at 557 next fiscal year, the year-over-year rate of increase would be about 6% from 2007 and 3.4% from 1997. Before answering questions, I'd like to express some thanks to my sincere thanks to the Finance Department, for their expertise and data and guidance. The Water Supply and Planning Division, our groundwater resources technicians, and everybody else who contributed, without which, of course, we would not be able to do our reports. And of course, and I thank you all for your time and attention tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions or comments from the board?
This is
Director Gunther?
one of the best reports we get, throughout the year. There's so much in this. We've been able to see it multiple years, but for somebody who's watching for the first time, they might get an information overload. And some of the stuff that isn't noticed. I mean, I was just looking at it, like the concept that above the Hayward Fault is separate, totally separate from below the Hayward Fault. If you look at that graph, it's just sort of there, but it's a fascinating subject that they're completely different. The various layerings, how we've been at this for so many years. Once again, another great job. Thank you so much.
Director Sethy?
I have a question and a comment. So when I went through the presentation earlier, something stood out as an anomaly here on slide number 20 and 21. And I'm kind of curious as to what is going on here, because at first I thought it might be a decimal place problem. But if you notice in the southern part of our community, we saw a 17.1% reduction, whereas everything else is within a single to 3 digits. What is going on in the last 10 years in the southern part of the service area?
Well, that's a great question. We may have to come back with that, but I did look at, I can tell you something. I did look at a couple of funny looking points besides, not that particular one, and I was like, oh, that looks kind of out, really strange, Sometimes what can happen is the regression, what we call the R squared, is like kind of a low number. You can have noise. I don't know if any answers to that, but what can happen if it's a new well, you might get some, it's not equilibrated yet. You can get it can start up high, and then it starts to, and then you have a couple of points that are up there, and then you start to see some trend stuff. So probably, with this particular algorithm we have to do this, it's a computer program where we're capturing all the data, in a specified period. And then, it runs a regression there and you get the numbers. But sometimes some of the quality of the trend, it can be a little bit, it's not the same for every well. So it kind of merits, it's probably wise to look at that a little bit more. It's also way out there in the salt ponds too, where it's, okay, that's sustainable Fremont, so it's shouldn't be too bad. But you can also have sometimes like really low numbers. It's like 10 milligrams per liter, or 50, and it's still really low. But then it goes down to 10 milligrams per liter, and it's a big
But
percentage.
I think of this area as being more salty.
Well, it's the Sentinel Fremont, so the Newark, yes, that would be true, but the Sentinel Fremont doesn't have the outlet to the bay and the connection, so it looks like it's outside the 250 milligram per liter envelope, so it could be just really good, fairly fresh water out there. But it's a good point. It's a big number. It's good. 17.7.
17.1.
Yeah, 17.1.
Yeah.
It's probably good to look at that and just to see what's behind that particular number
Well,
there.
maybe you can mention it in a future presentation.
Mhm.
My comment is, years ago, when I remember you doing these presentations, I'm thinking back 15 years ago or more, you used to have a slide where you showed where we were and where we hope to be by the year 2070. And
Okay.
I thought that was a really helpful slide to kind of project out to the future and see decade by decade how we're cleaning things up. even though it's a bit subjective, I would like to see something like that going out to 2100, you know, based on trends, where do we expect to be decade by decade moving forward?
Okay. Well, thanks.
Oh.
I'll get back.
Other than that, this is one of my favorite reports that I look forward to. And I do spend quite a bit of time with it at home. Because it's fascinating to see what is going on geologically and under the surface in our groundwater. And I love it. It's great.
Well, thank you so much. I think as far as projecting chloride concentrations, we can do that with existing trends. Beyond that, it's a.
Can I ask you to be closer to the mic since?
It would be like a solute transport type of
Yeah.
water quality model, which is something that we could be looking at. in the
The
future.
second and last comment I have is, I know that our public relations group works very closely with Project WET, all the teachers and educators in the community and everything, and I've participated in a couple of their classes as well. I think that this kind of information is so interesting for the teachers and the students, you know, that are learning in our community. I would really encourage you to kind of push it out there.
Okay.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, Director Sethy. Director Wee?
Yes, well, thank you for the report. It's nice not to have to worry about fish. The groundwater. But the water reclamation, the act that we're dealing with, I understand only deals with chlorides, correct?
Well, no, there's.
Or does it go broader?
There's something, basically, the act does allow, you know, general actions to take care of the supply and the quality of groundwater in the basin. And that's.
And that brings to mind then the question, you know, salinity is not a real health issue. It's the 250 MCL milligrams per liter is based on taste, the ability of a very sensitive palate to be able to taste the salt. You can go 10 times more and we gargle with it. But we do have some health items in the groundwater now, PFAS, magnesium, bromide, these other elements, and I don't see that in your report. Is that something that we should concern ourselves with? And
Let Ms. Walden, thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Hallowell. So, great question. So water quality is reported mostly in the groundwater monitoring report. And so we include additional information such as PFAS, and there's some samples where we're collecting nitrate data, and that's all reported in the groundwater monitoring report. And then that feeds into the survey report on groundwater conditions that then ties into the replenishment assessment. So the replenishment assessment is really looking more at how much water we need to bring in order to keep the basin within its operating range. And that is more strongly tied to the chlorides within the basin. But the replenishment assessment, all the pie chart for all the costs includes the groundwater protection programs, the well ordinance program. There's a benefit to all users of the groundwater basin in there.
so when we come up with our dollar amount that we charge for the person for pumping water, which 95% or so is paid for by the district, or 95% of the user. All of these other additional cost factors are included in that
Correct.
cost.
Yes.
And yet, when I say, take a look at the report, I see the chlorides, water replenishment report. Then we come up with the dollars that seems to spend out of this report. And I haven't seen where we.
Can you pull up the
bring in
pie
the other
chart for me,
costs.
JR? Thank you.
Much of which is a large, tens of millions of dollars for PFAS for the current.
Yeah, so the groundwater protection program is also the groundwater quality, all of it, including the chlorides, the monitor spring and fall program, as well as our PFAS monitoring. So it's all embedded within the cost.
Of that we charge for people.
Of
that
that
pump the
25 million, yeah, of all the charges, yeah.
water. It'd be interesting to see how those components are added, because in the past I don't recall seeing those other additional elements thrown in.
Director Akbari?
No questions from me. I'll just echo that this is always a really fascinating presentation and one that I look forward to each year. So thank you, and thank you to your team that put in all the effort to put it together.
I do have another question or that's a question. Have we ever really looked at, we did a lot of well destruction in the last, 10, 20 years.
Mhm.
Is it possible that some of these numbers, that 17 point something, is a reflection upon well destruction?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Former well ordinance.
Yes, I have that benefit of being the former well ordinance supervisor, so I've overseen a number of well destructions in my career. The northern part of the basin is where we've seen it the easiest when it comes to the chloride concentrations. If you remember the salt pond restoration project
Right.
and the 3 years that we spent out of the salt ponds looking for abandoned water wells and getting them properly destroyed by Cargill Salt and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So that's something we can definitely bring back to committee. It's been a while since we've had those discussions and have looked at how our well destruction program really is a benefit to the water quality in the basin.
Well, that's just a fun topic to begin
Yeah,
with.
I agree.
I don't know if you saw it, but a lawsuit, a couple was awarded $1.8 million down in Santa Clara this past week because there was a well underneath their home that had not been destroyed, and it was an artesian well. It was 400 feet deep, and they were siphoning out the water with a generator to the tune of like up to 25,000 gallons a day. But the humidity from the water underneath their home destroyed everything. And so the homeowners association and everybody was denying that they had responsibility, including Santa Clara Valley Water District. Turns out everybody was wrong, couple was right, and the judge said, reprimanded everybody. And so we don't want any developments going in over unnoticed, undestroyed wells. Keep an eye on that.
We definitely do through our well destruction program. Good to
Thank
know.
you. Mr. Hallowell? Just want to say thank you, echoing what the rest of the directors said. Great job. I always enjoy the presentations, and I will just say I spend a lot of time on each slides. It's actually really gratifying to actually see progress in our aquifer reclamation program. I could speak. But before I close this out, I know we have at least one members of the public left. Do you have any questions or comments for staff? Nothing? All right. So I think with that, we're done with this item. My understanding is the next item is going to take more than 10 minutes. So I am just going to say we should take a pause now, or do you have a very short general manager's report?
Oh, I have two very brief items. If you'd like to rearrange the agenda a little bit, we
Yeah.
can do
So
general
why
managers
don't we move
reports.
general manager's report up, and we'll take 6.3.2 after our break.
All right, efficient use of time. That's great. So, and it also puts a cap on how much time I can take in
Yes.
general manager. Very tactical of you. Actually, we have two, so I'll turn it to Mr. Wonderlich first, our Director of Finance Administration, for a brief follow-up item related to advanced metering infrastructure.
Yeah, so the time has arrived to notify our customers who up till now have requested not to receive a meter. The board did late last year approve some fees associated with permanent or requested opt-outs by customers. A letter was mailed to customers yesterday, may start hitting inboxes over the weekend. And 33 total customers are receiving a letter. So actually the number has come down from where we were previously. So we're actually really pleased that it's only 33. And as they see the conditions to remain opted out, we do expect that there may be some interest to opt into the AMI program. But we'll see how that progresses. And obviously, You know, there are some customers who feel very strongly about this topic, and there's potential for some outreach to the district or to the board upon customers receiving these letters.
Quick question on that. What is the amount that we're charging for those who opt out?
Yeah, so it's a one-time opt-out setup fee of $125 based on getting our program related to manual meter reading set up to accommodate them. And then a recurring fee of $48 per month for the manual, not per month, per billing cycle for the manual meter read. And then that will be reevaluated though again in the fall, and hopefully by the fall, we'll begin to have some data on that's very specific to this opt-out program, whereas the beginning point is our generic field service charge. And then so we may adjust this in the future as we get more data specific to this program.
And if a meter were hardwired, we would not have the primary concern of the reading a remote to
5G cell.
5G systems. Have we looked at the cost of what it would be to hardwire these meters to eliminate to give us a direct feedback?
I guess I'm not sure I follow what you mean by hardwire.
Well, if you had a direct wire connection as opposed to
I guess
remote 5G.
I guess I'm trying to imagine in my mind exactly like a connection from the meter location into the customer's home, into their internet. I guess I'm struggling to understand what
I'm just
you're
wondering if there's
envisioning.
another mechanism that would somehow address the issues that they have. But what is remarkable about this is 5G is ubiquitous. You have these same waves are going throughout to various other connections, PG&E services, addition. But if there was
Plus Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and lots of other.
Yeah.
Bluetooth,
And the
radio,
meters are
AM/FM
out
radio.
generally at the curb in front of the house, right? So it's, the district is very comfortable with the studies that have been performed that this does not pose that type of risk, but we understand some customers may wish to opt out.
I'm not suggesting there is a health issue at all with this. I don't believe there is, but obviously we have 33 customers that if there's an alternative way to do the measurements.
Some of those 33 are the neighbors of customers who feel strongly about potential health issues, and so they've gone to their neighbors and asked their neighbors to also opt out. So what we would, I mean, we'll see what happens, but we would expect particularly some of those neighbors may choose to opt into the AMI program.
Yeah, and as late breaking sort of developments, I didn't include this as an item on the agenda, so we just wanted to report that that's what's happening right now,
Okay.
so that you all are not surprised if you hear
That number's
something.
getting smaller out of 86,000 customers.
Definitely.
33 is not, that includes
okay.
neighbors. So
Mhm.
it's not an extraordinary number.
Yeah, no, it's out of almost 88,000 total service connections, it's a very small number. And, you know, there do continue to be some that for district reasons on the district side that haven't been upgraded yet, but the distribution maintenance division continues to do great work in addressing those. So the number gets smaller all the time.
Thank you. Next item.
Okay, next item, also not put on the agenda, but also late breaking, and wanted to make sure you all knew that we are once again meddling with your peers, this time at the federal legislature. We are sending some letters to our federal representatives, Kana and Swalwell, to urge support for its HR 1267, which is a bill in the federal legislature that has to do with sort of bolstering liability protection against CERCLA PFAS issues. So as you recall, having heard some months ago that EPA has determined that they would limit enforcement actions against water agencies, wastewater agencies that are passive receivers of PFAS, and just through our normal operations, we have to handle and manage PFAS. Well, this is a bill within the federal legislature that would sort of codify that liability protection. So the district is sending some letters requesting support. And we did have a quick opportunity to have our president and vice president take a quick look at those letters. But I also just wanted the full board to know that we're out there, once again, meddling with your peers, this time at the federal level. So just a quick note on that issue too.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? If not, I know it's only 7:12, but let's take a break and
Perfect
be
timing.
back at 7. All right, it's 7:30. Let's restart the meeting. So the next item, I believe, is item 6.3.2.
Indeed it is. It's update on 2025 water supply conditions and fish passage facilities operations. And I would pity the person that has to follow Mike Hollowell in a presentation, but if anybody can do it, it's Leonard Ash, but I'm pretty sure Ms. Heides has a few opening remarks.
Just a few opening remarks. We know there has been a lot of interest in what's going on this year, both with water, but also with our new fish passage facilities that we're continuing to gain experience with. So Leonard Ash is here tonight, our water supply supervisor, to share the latest updates on this year's water outlook, as well as what we're seeing out in Alameda Creek. So I will turn it over to Mr. Ash to share his presentation.
All right, thank you, Ms. Heides, and I do need to remember never to get on the agenda for March. This has happened multiple years now.
You're welcome anytime, Leonard.
Well, good evening, directors and members of the public. It's an honor to be here tonight to give you some good news about both our water supply conditions as well as an update on our fish passage facilities operations so far for this migration season. So we'll start with the first slide, and this gets to your question, Director Sethy, regarding our local rainfall. So this is our local rainfall that we measure every day from a rain gauge that we have at our blending facility property. And this graph, all the slides that you'll see in the presentation were prepared a week ago. So I'll be providing you numbers tonight that have been updated as of today. So the numbers I'll be saying won't match what you see on the slides, but it's the most current information. So as of today, we have 13.1 inches of rainfall. So that reflects over an inch of rainfall that we received over the past week with the rain event that we just had. And there's more rain on the way. So if you're looking at the back of the graph, you can see we have that blue shaded area. The green shaded area is your average year, and the tan shaded area is sort of our dry year. So right now, we're right on the cusp of moving into an average year. But if rainfall does slow down by the rest of the water year, we could end up within a dry year. If we do end up in average, we'll barely be average. So we're trending lower than average this year locally. With the next slide, you'll see how conditions look in Northern California. So this is the typical 8-station index that we commonly refer to monitor conditions in the northern part of the state, which affects our imported supplies from the State Water Project that are collected in Oroville. And with the dark blue line on the graph shows the current year. And as of today, we're at 46.1 inches. So we're under where we were in 2022-23, but it remains above average for Northern California. And with the next slide, you'll see how that affects water storage across the state. This graph, it's hard to read all the particulars, but overall, you can see those large blue bars at each of the reservoirs indicates that there are healthy levels of storage, water currently sitting in storage across the state. And Oroville right now is 84% full, which is 124% of average for this time of year. Likewise, the Hetch Hetchy Reservoir, 79% full today, which is 133% of average. San Luis Reservoir, which is pumped in, is 85% full, which is 103% of average for this time of year. So very healthy water conditions across the state, typically reflecting that Northern California influence. With the next slide, you'll see our precipitation forecasts, both for the month on the left and then the 3-month outlook on the right. If you look at the National Weather Service's Climate Prediction Center, for the next 1 or 2 weeks, we're looking at an increased probability of above normal chances of precipitation for our area. and for Northern California in particular, and that probability decreases as you move farther south. But even locally, we're above normal probabilities. And so you see that's the typical precipitation forecast that you see affected by La Nina conditions. And we did have La Nina earlier in the water year. It's not persistent anymore, but some of those residual effects of the jet stream are still affecting weather patterns. And with the next slide, please, you'll see that that's affected drought conditions across the state. Again, Northern California, not in a drought at all, but as you go farther south, you will see the influence of the dry weather. So about 42% of the state is not considered to be in drought. And again, this is our drought monitor. We typically look at this, but keep in mind this is just one metric developed by the Department of Agriculture. It looks at specific metrics on how they define a drought. But you'll see that about 17% of the state is abnormally dry, and 41% of the state is somewhere between moderate drought to exceptional drought. With the next slide, just want to wrap it up for our overall water supply condition. As I mentioned, locally we're trending towards average, but we had a very healthy 2 water years before this, and so our groundwater levels are very healthy. And then for Lake Del Valle, which is also a water right that we have to collect local supplies, there's currently space in there to collect additional water. As of February, we started seeing some of that local inflow into Lake Del Valle. So for the month of February, we got around 3,700 acre feet of local water in that reservoir. Likewise, San Francisco's Hetch Hetchy Regional Water System, they're a little farther south than Oroville, but they also benefited from the healthy water years before this. So those conditions are also very favorable. Steve Ritchie said very slim chance that there'll be any water shortage restrictions from the regional water system this year. So we're expecting to receive as much water as we can under our contract with San Francisco.
Make a quick comment. There's those within the Tuolumne system proponents, et cetera, that would argue that should be San Francisco has water supply through the 2030 demands, a 5-year reserve in their local reservoirs.
All right, thank you, noted. And then lastly, I do want to point out some good news. In late February, Department of Water Resources did announce a Table A allocation increase. And so we moved up from 20%, and we now have 35% of our Table A allocation. So that means a new water supply is available to the district as a contractor with the State Water Project. That 35% is greater than 14,000 acre feet of new water available to us. And so with the next slide, that really has affected our water supply planning then for this year. We started out conservatively with past updates to the board. And as you see, the water year has provided mixed results across the state. Northern California faring better than Southern California. But our baseline operations remain, and we've actually shifted with both the inflow of local water at Del Valle, coupled with that increase in Table A allocation. Really, we've shifted this year from needing to take water from storage, such as our semi-tropic banked supplies, and we've moved into a put year. So we're looking at sending water down to semi-tropic to increase our storage in our banking program.
And what about sending any water to San Luis?
And we do have water in San Luis Reservoir. We always plan conservatively and keep some water there from one year to the next as carryover water. And then with the Table A allocation that we've received so far at 35%, we do plan, again, conservatively to keep water, this year's Table A water, to keep some of that in San Luis as carryover for next year, if next year is dry.
We had any luck in getting additional water storage capacity in San Luis with the 2 raises of San Luis that are currently approved?
So currently, though, that raise project is being considered on the federal side of San Luis. And for those who aren't aware, San Luis is a jointly owned and managed facility. It's used to store water for the Bureau for the Central Valley Project, as well as state water through the State Water Project. And my understanding is that raise is being developed on the federal side.
Time to become a federal contractor.
All right.
So before we move on to fish, any other questions or comments for Mr. Ash? on water supply?
All right. And then that last bullet point just sort of wraps it up. It's what I've said before, but from a water supply perspective, we do have enough supplies available to us to meet our anticipated demand for this calendar year.
Do we have any questions or comments from our members of the public? No? Okay, then moving on to the fish.
All right, chapter 2. This deals with operation of our fish passage facilities. And this is just by way of a refresh for the board, just to remind everyone, our fish passage facilities were designed primarily for Oncorhynchus micus, so micus, also known as steelhead. And the steelhead migration season sort of has two sections to it. The immigration season, where those adults are coming from the ocean up to fresh water for spawning. That immigration season is January through March. And then the emigration season, which is the out-migrating juveniles, as well as kelts, which are the adults that have spawned, who want to go back out to the ocean. The emigration season, typically April and May. And obviously these are rough estimates. As we continue to operate our facilities, we'll learn more about the Central California coast steelhead in particular, and their migration habits. But with the next slide, just wanted to provide some updates on our pit tag detections. That's one of the two biological monitoring technologies that we have at the RD1 Bart Weir fish passage facility. So when I prepared these slides last week, we had detected 3 unique pit tags registered going through those antenna. And they were registered through both sets of antennas, so we were able to detect them moving in the out-migration direction. So we got that directionality because they hit both sets of antennas. Since this was prepared, I actually have late breaking news that on March 11th, we did detect a 4th pit tag. It only registered at one of the antennas, so we weren't able to get directionality. However, we were able to confirm it's associated with San Francisco's tagging efforts upstream, so it's in all likelihood an out-migrating juvenile. With the next slide, I wanted to provide an update on our second biological monitoring, and that's the sonar camera that we have installed in that same fish passage facility. As we did last year, we went into the ladder in late February to clean off the lens. There is some silt deposition that happens. It's normal part of the process of using it during high flow events. You get a lot of sediment in the water, and some of that deposits on the camera. So we had to go in and clean it off, and about a week later, we experienced some technical difficulties with the camera. This is the first time we've experienced this, the 3rd year of operation. And we tried troubleshooting remotely with the manufacturer, but unfortunately it was not an issue they could resolve remotely. So we had to remove the device earlier this week, and we sent it off to the manufacturer. So we're waiting their diagnosis of the turnaround time for that. But we're anticipating, and we've worked with our partners in the watershed to inform them of this development. And we anticipate, in worst cases, that we won't have additional sonar video for the remainder of the migration season. But hopefully, with some good news, we'll be able to get it back sooner than that. But we're planning for the worst at this moment. And while we were in there cleaning the ladder in February, I did want to point out we did see a nice Pacific lamprey hanging out in the ladder. And so I wanted to include a photo of that for those who are so inclined to like to see the fish photos. With the next slide, though, just to wrap this all up, we're going to continue to operate our fish passage facilities in compliance with all of our permits. And we're prioritizing our local water supplies. Because we do have healthy groundwater levels, there really isn't a competition or a concern of being able to meet those bypass requirements this year. We're continuing to improve on our stored water with groundwater banking and semi-tropic. So if there are more favorable conditions as the water year progresses, that's just additional water that we'll have available to increase those stored banking accounts. We're making preparations, as I mentioned in the very first slide. If it does end up being a dry year locally, even if it's just a bit of a dry year, we do have additional permit requirements to run pulse flow operations in April and May to help contribute to out-migrating juvenile steelhead. So that's going to be a a new process for us, the third year of operations. This may be our first dry year operation. And so working with our partners with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife and with National Marine Fisheries as a coordinated effort to schedule and plan those increased bypass flows to help out-migrating steelhead. I do want to add, second to last bullet point there, that water supply staff is working diligently to finalize our annual report. This is a report to National Marine Fisheries that describes our work for the last migration season. So that's 23-24. And we're looking forward to completing that and having that submitted next month to National Marine Fisheries. And as we did last year, we'll post that information on our website, make it publicly available. And lastly, we'll continue to keep the board apprised as there are any changes to water supply conditions. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any additional questions you might have.
Questions or comments from the board? Director
Yes.
Weed.
Fish ladders are built to promote upstream migration. What numbers, if any, do we have of upstream migration in Alameda Creek?
It's a good question. Yeah, and just to clarify, there are design features for the fish passage facilities that not only help for in-migration, but also help with emigration. We have,
With or without the fish ladders, you would still have the outstream.
but the actual number of in-migrating adults, right now, we don't have an exact count. What we have been publishing in our annual report last year and what we intend to publish for the 23-24 season is an estimate. And the reason for that is that as of yet, we haven't detected any pit tagged adults coming up through the ladder. So the only other detection equipment that we have is that hydroacoustical or the sonar video imagery. Now the sonar imagery, it's very useful, but we can get sort of a silhouette or an outline of the fish. It's not that dialed in yet to be able to identify a species, so we can estimate length. And given the time of year that we see fish of the size that we would expect to be adult in migrating steelhead, we can come up with an estimate of the number of fish.
And what is that estimate?
So as of so far this year, we've detected around 4,200 fish that are of the size of in-migrating steelhead. Now, I do want to caveat that doesn't mean we have 4,200 in-migrating steelhead. Those could be carp, those could be bass, they could be certain fall run Chinook salmon of a smaller size. We expect fall run Chinook tend to be a little bit larger, and so they're sort of the largest size class when we try to identify fish by size. But within that bucket of adult steelhead, there could be other species present using the ladder at the same time.
Have we done any samples to see what that mix might be?
Yeah, so we're currently, we've been, as I mentioned in my last update to the board, we are starting to use a new technology with AI to help us process the video, to look at the tail beat and use that as a signature for species within that size classification. So that's one technology we're trying to employ. The second thing that we'd like to do, we haven't done it yet this year, and unfortunately with the sonar camera not functioning, those plans are delayed. But what we'd like to do is get GoPro video in the fish ladder at the same time so that we can compare with a video image against the sonar image. And hopefully we can use that information to help train the AI that's looking at the sonar video.
Even though it might be an incidental taking, thought of just capturing all the fish that come up for a period of time and seeing what's there.
Well, I do want to stress
Sort them
that these facilities, all of our fish passage facilities are passive facilities. They've been designed specifically to not impede fish migration. The Alameda Creek, this part of Alameda Creek is a engineered flood control channel. It's not at all great habitat for any omicus to be hanging around. So whether they're out migrating or in migrating, we really want them to continue on their way as fast as possible. And that's precisely why the district doesn't have those sorts of fish survey requirements attached with our permit.
No requirement, but no knowledge. It strikes me that we'd have the ability to do a short time sample. In that period of time, we'd see how many fish over an hour or two came through, and to get a confirmation on what your other readings are.
Yeah, and this highlights the importance of the partnerships with others in the watershed. And I can't stress enough how valuable it is to work in partnership with San Francisco. They have a very extensive fisheries monitoring effort. They do rotary screw traps, the electrofishing, and fyke net surveys at different times in the calendar year. And the information they're getting is supportive of the efforts that our fish passage facilities are contributing to improving the omicus in the watershed.
I hope we keep in mind the cost. We're spending at least over $500,000 a year with consultants and staff to operate the fish passage issue. We had $100 million invested with the opportunity cost of 6.5%, which we use for our OPEB discount rate. That'd be another $6.5 million. That comes to about $7 million a year is the cost of being able to provide this fish passage every year. And so it'd be interesting to see how many actually done. None of them have noted to been tagged going upstream. We have a couple of up to 4,000 based on sonar reads, but we haven't done any physical captures and capture and check and release. Strikes me as being one mechanism that you could have some more reliability where this $7 million a year is being spent.
And I would note, we have seen a real shift in the interactions that we have with the public when we're operating these fish passage facilities along public trails. While they were under construction, we did receive a lot of feedback from customers, from residents in this area, asking why the water district is investing all this money in fish passage. But now that the facilities are built, I got to say, I haven't had those comments in years. And really, the public seems to be very supportive. When we connect the value to the district of being able to continue to divert water from Alameda Creek, how protective these efforts are to securing 40% of our water supply, it's a very valuable investment for our district.
Because of the sediments in January of 2022, our entire system was down for at least 10 months because of trying to get permits through the Regional Water Quality Control Board. It took 4 hours to get it back in operation, then we had to do some more replacement work. So that was on an operational cost, a hit comes regardless. We still spent the $7 million a year. It's a challenge. I would hope that we do the next iteration, the IRP, we look at the Niles Canyon Aqueduct, reserve it, and eventually get it back in operation because that would have been, is an alternative to the fish ladders. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Director Sethy?
Well, we're not going to pull out the fish ladders.
We may take them out of service, but I don't know.
You want to dynamite
They're
them?
still going to be there. No, you just deflate them.
So, thank you for the very nice informative presentation. I have been keeping the USGS Niles gauge on my desktop open at all times just to track the storms. And so I've been watching the water in Alameda Creek fluctuate from just like 2 feet all the way up to 11, 12 feet. And the current running from just a few hundred CFS up to a few thousand. It's quite dramatic. It goes up like spikes every time there's a storm. So I imagine that with that outflow to the bay, that there has been some attraction of fish coming upstream. I didn't know what the numbers were, but anecdotally from folks that are in the Alameda Creek Alliance, they've been kind of monitoring what's going on even further upstream in some of the creeks and like Sinbad Creek and other places. So people are noticing that there's fish coming up. In particular, they're paying attention to steelhead and to salmon. What I would like to know moving forward, first of all, let me say I generally concur with the comments of Director Weed. We made a substantial investment in these efforts paid by our ratepayers. whether it's required or not, by the reports that we have to file officially with government agencies, I think we owe it to our public. It's an obligation to put forward material information that we know and to try and, I would say, exceed expectations, you know, in what we report back to the community. And this is moving forward for the next coming decades, right? But this doesn't happen instantly overnight, that you get a restoration of a fishery habitat. Number two, I'm interested in you talked about the cameras that went down and so I'm interested in redundancy in the system, if we can build that in, because these are not really super expensive devices. Number three, I think that we actually need to have San Francisco report back to us, and it needs to be included in your future reports, what is going on upstream in Sunol Regional Park. And I'm especially interested, like John, in the in-migration of fish. And the third thing, which I've talked to General Manager Steve Ritchie about too, is it'd be really nice to know whether the fish are actually getting above Little Yosemite Falls, because there's been quite a debate about that, and you and I have talked about it. And if we're really going to have a good thriving fishery habitat in the upper watershed, we need to make sure that fish are actually getting up there. And I know from doing my hiking above the falls, you have kind of a flat, wide plain where there's a lot of birthing grounds, spawning grounds for these fish. And it's quite extensive, you know, beautiful terrain if you can get above the falls. So those are some things, you know, I just have in the back of my mind that, you know, would be interesting to know as we keep following things.
Thank you. Yes, if I could just respond briefly to the San Francisco data, we do have a great working relationship with staff at the SFPUC. They have fisheries biologists on staff, and we are sharing real-time information. It's all preliminary information. So I want to be sensitive to the fact that we're sharing preliminary data, but give them the time they need to QA/QC to process that. And they have a timeline for publishing their annual reports on their activities as well. But I have noted here, I think it'd be great to incorporate some of their published results and put that into context with what we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments from Director Akbari?
So first of all, excellent presentation. I feel like we got a lot of good news stories tonight, so I'm certainly happy. My questions were actually related to the camera, similar to Director Sethy's on redundancy. So I'm curious, what are we expecting the lifetime usefulness of the camera to be? And like Director Sethy mentioned on redundancy, should we be looking at maybe putting in a second camera if this camera goes down for some technical issue and it's taken out for an entire season? That kind of defeats the purpose of having the camera there in the first place. So
yeah, these are all very great questions. I know Director Sethy brought up the redundancy issue at the last board meeting that we discussed this. Staff has looked into the cost. As I mentioned before, the camera itself is about the size of a loaf of bread. It's $100,000 loaf of bread. It's a very expensive piece of equipment. And so we looked at the pros and cons of buying a redundant one. And first, there's the budget consideration. The other thing that we're still evaluating is the utility of this particular technology for application. It's in a concrete box, and it uses sound waves. So if you've ever been to a cramped nightclub, right, there's a lot of noise. And it's a similar analogy with what the quality of the imagery that we're able to get with this technology. No doubt about it, it's state of the art. We got the best technology for this type of equipment that's available. But it may not be the most appropriate application of that technology. And we did research and talking with other public agencies that operate fish ladders. Typically, it takes about 5 years, sometimes more, to dial in this technology for an installation. And so we knew going into this that out of the two pieces of equipment, this would be the more challenging one to fine tune. And we're still evaluating its utility in this case. So I think until we're convinced that it's worth doubling down our investments, right now, we want to see how long it takes to get this one repaired. If it's quick enough that we can get it back during the out-migration season, that would be beneficial. And there are other options too that we're evaluating, such as a short-term rental, other ways of sort of bridging this gap, and weighing the pros and cons of the cost for that versus the value of the data we would get. So it's stuff that it's all very good questions. Staff's evaluating that, but we aren't at the point right now to recommend doubling down for a $100,000 piece of equipment that for the long run may or may not serve the district well. So we're continuing to evaluate that.
Let me encourage you to find a methodology of validating the readings on the sonar cameras. Even if for 15 minutes you net any fish that comes through, compare it to what your reading is on your sonar camera, you'll know if you're getting a realistic reading and the type of fish that are going up. The carp, or is it lampreys?
I'm just going to say it's easier said than done because capturing it would equal take.
No,
And you'll
you
need a
release,
permit.
just catch and release.
Nope.
Question on that lamprey.
Yeah.
Approximately how big is that?
Oh dear. I didn't see this one. This was, the photo you saw was taken by one of our water controllers that was down in the ladder. I believe they said it was about 18 inches long, about a foot and a
The
half.
water controller's still here?
It looks more like an eel.
It is.
Look at them up close. They
Yeah.
look like eels.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions or comments from the board?
Are they edible?
I believe I believe some people do eat them, yes.
Question and comments from our members of public? If not, all right, moving on.
Thank you.
Next one is item 7, director's comment reports on meetings attended and agenda item requests. So 7.1, Director Sethy, you have a
Yeah.
report from the virtual Los Vaqueros Reservoir JPA board meeting?
Yes. Let me just reiterate, thank you, Mr. Ash. I always enjoy your updates that you provide. Thank you. So my report is very short. We met yesterday for our monthly board meeting. We're proceeding ahead with closing all the books, closed the audit for the last fiscal year. The final audit for this current fiscal year, we will review next month. And I got a email today that was directed to me and our executive director for closing the bank account. So a little bit more than $11 million is going to go out this week. And about 300,000 of that will be put into a escrow account with the general counsel, the law firm of our general counsel, to wrap things up on some final things by the end of June. Just to highlight, we spent about $76 million on the project, all parties involved. The project participants, the ones that are represented on the board, the 6 of us out of the 8 who have paid in, put in $15 to $16 million. We're expected to get back to each of the 6 agencies $1.5 million. I will append my report by saying that I attended the California Water Commission meeting last month virtually, where they were talking about these subjects and the WISIP program from the Prop 1 funds that were passed in 2014. As I mentioned yesterday in our board meeting, I heard there was some disgruntlement from CCWD staff for me even bringing it up, but I felt an obligation to bring it up because it was in a state hearing at the California Water Commission. There was general consensus from the commissioners as to, let me use a strong word, how abominable it was that the project proponents were the ones that pulled the plug on this project. And there was light discussion about the fact that how do we prevent this from happening in the future? There has to be some strong disincentive or penalty in place to prevent events like this from happening. And incentives to keep moving forward, to invite in an arbitrator or some middle person who can try to negotiate among all the member parties. That we can't have the California taxpayers approving bond money and working on a project for over a decade, and then all of a sudden, the plug is pulled. So that was one sentiment. The other thing I wanted to inform our group is they were trying to decide whether and how to allocate the remaining funds from the Los Vaqueros Reservoir project. And the Harvest Water Bank project near Sacramento is actually well along the way toward being completed. So of the 5 remaining projects, it appears as though later this month, they will approve allocating money proportionally to the other projects. So Pacheco Reservoir, Sites Reservoir, the other 2. There was some discussion about whether to open up the process again for new solicitations, and they steered away from that, even though there was a very good presentation and case made for a west side reservoir north of San Luis. Yes. And so the commissioners suggested that they're very open-minded, and all of them were supportive of that new reservoir, West Side Valley, north of San Luis. If there are new monies that become available through another bond or something for future WISIP projects. And they reiterated their strong feeling that a lot of the medium-size, more modest projects like the one that we proposed for Lake Del Valle on reoperation of reservoirs, that's something they're also very much interested in. I attended from 9:30 until their lunchtime, and it was, every once in a while, it's really good to sit in on those meetings and listen to what other people are having to say. And there's so much to learn. But I would say, in summary, there was great disappointment in what's happened with Los Vaqueros Reservoir. So that's my report.
Thank you, Director Sethy. Director Gunther, anything?
No, I appreciate Director Sethy's comments.
Director Wee?
Yes, to follow up on Director Sethy's comments, California Water Commission has a meeting this coming Wednesday. They're going to look at Prop 1 and Prop 4. Prop 1, they have $500 million, primarily the Los Vaqueros funding to reallocate. And on Prop 4, which is recreation parks and has a water element, there's $75 million. I would strongly encourage us to dust off the report that West Coast prepared for us on Del Valle, reoperation of Del Valle. 100%, since it's reoperation,
under Prop 1, 100% funded with Prop 1 funds, no matching funds required. And I think we've had a change in mindset among some of the players on what the future of the potential for Delaware Reservoir is. I believe there's an additional 50,000 acre feet that can be acquired by relocating some park facilities. And that is a no-brainer, and I would hope we can go back and revisit it in a quick manner, because this is an ongoing element. Particularly look at the Prop 4 funding, because that also deals with recreation, and may well be an easier sum of money to be able to apply. Second item is Stivers Lagoon, otherwise known as Lake Elizabeth. Named after a city that no longer exists in Australia, renaming it Stivers Lagoon may be more appropriate both in its physical and hydrological condition as well as its future. There was a time when the city of Fremont was going to put the old city hall in Stivers Lagoon, but realized it was under this architectural concept of brutalism, a big mass of concrete, and they realized the design was for the water to flow underneath those old pillars that it was built on, but that it would sink. They didn't know how fast and how quick it would sink, how far. So they put it on the knoll, which was a pressure ridge of the Hayward Fault. It's now gone. But if we take a look at the aeration, again, and the chasing fish, almost exclusively carp, and $135,000 to be spent to extend the life of the ability of carp to exist. Newark had the problem in the lakes where they spent a lot of time and anguish trying to salvage some carp. It's not anyone's remote concept of an endangered or threatened species. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Wee. Director Akbari? Nothing for me either. Then let's move on to item 8, closed session. Item 8.1 is pursuant to California Government Code Section 54957.6, conference with labor negotiator. Agency designated negotiators are at Stevenson, Jonathan Wunderlich, Amy Reeve, and Stacy Q. Employee organization is Operating Engineers Local 3. Item 8.2 pursuant to California Government Code Section 54957.6, conference with labor negotiators, agency designated negotiators at Stevenson, Jonathan Wunderlich, and Amy Reeve. Unrepresented employees, management, confidential, professional employees. So with that, which conference room are we adjourning to?
Operations Conference Room.
Operation conference room, please. All right, it's 9:27 and the board has returned from closed session. Council, would you report back, please?
Sure, I'd be happy to provide the report. The board met in closed session for item 8.1 pursuant to California Government Code Section 54957.6, conference with labor negotiators, agency designated negotiators, Ed Stevenson, Jonathan Wunderlich, Amy Reeve. Stacy Q was not present tonight. The employee organization, Operating Engineers Local 3, and in the closed session, direction was given to the agency designated negotiators. For item 8.2, also pursuant to California Government Code Section 54957.6, conference with labor negotiators, agency designated negotiators, Ed Stevenson, Jonathan Wunderlich, and Amy Reeve. The unrepresented employees or the management, confidential, and professional employees. In that closed session, direction was given to the agency designated negotiators. And that concludes the open session report.
Perfect. Then I'll say the meeting is adjourned at 9:28.